If you've ever wondered what makes the best of all of the country wines, it's this one. Blackberry, rich, sumptuous, velvety, fruity. But we're not going to make blackberry wine today. We're going to make Blackberry Port. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the kitchen. Welcome to making Blackberry Port. Blackberry Port is incredible. It does need a little bit of care and attention. It's not a super simple recipe. We're going to explore some techniques that I haven't used in some of the other country wine videos we've made. And it is a real port. Now, what do I mean by port? Well, let's not get into a history lesson, but wines made in Portugal, some wines, were too delicate. They didn't survive transportation well. But what people found was if they fortified those wines, if they added brandy to them, if they raised the alcohol level to around 20%, they transported brilliantly and they tasted fantastic. And that's what port is. It's a fortified wine. And today we're going to be making a fortified wine. We're also going to use some quite particular yeasts. We're going to use some techniques like back sweetening and stabilising wine. But the end result is worth it. None of this stuff is complicated, but it does need a proper step-by-step approach to do well. But the end result, trust me, when you serve it to your friends or keep it for yourself for Christmas, is absolutely, absolutely worth it. Okay, so don't make notes through this video. As I say, we will be showing some techniques, etc. But what I'm going to do is give a downloadable ingredients list and a step-by-step technique guide on our website. You can find that link in the description below. So just watch, familiarise yourself and have a go. I promise you it's worth it. In order to get going, we need one of these, a fermenting bucket. What we're going to do is sterilise it first. Very simple, very cheap. Just put a good glug of plain unscented household bleach into it, a cupful, 50 ml, something like that. Fill it with water, leave it for 15 minutes, rinse it out twice. That's our fermenting vessel, posh word for a lidded white plastic bucket. That's it sterilised. Next job is to get our juice out of our fruit into that bucket. So let me show you our fruit. You may notice it's in vacuum packed packets, many vacuum packed packets. That's because we're making this wine with last year's fruit. Right now, the other side of the door behind you, Fiona is defrosting one of our chest freezers. And in order to do that, we wanted to take out some of the stuff that's been there a while. And last year's autumn fruit is one of those things. Now I want you to notice inside this vacuum packed bag how much juice is running around. And that answers a question we get asked a lot. Can I make this kind of wine from frozen fruit? Yes, it's brilliant, right? In fact, there's a lot to be said for freezing your own fruit or foraged fruit before making wine. It breaks down a lot of the structures of the fruit and lets the juice run freely, and it does no harm to the flavour at all. So I've got 4 kilos of fruit to make 1 gallon of wine. You need a lot of fruit to make this. So blackberries are ideal if you've got a good blackberry patch near you and you can pick them. I wouldn't want to buy the fruit for this, or if like us you grow a lot of your own fruit, good way of using up excess at this time of year. So we're going to get on, we're going to add this. Now I need to tell you, I don't have 4 kilos of blackberries. We've had a look, I've got 2 kilos left, but I've got 2 kilos of black currants too. And I'm going to make this recipe with a mix of both fruits. And that's fine, that's one of the joys of country wine. You don't have to stick rigidly to a recipe. I've made this recipe with all black currants and with all blackberries, and both are absolutely gorgeous. But what I've got now is half and half. I think that'll work well. You'll get mellow blackberry notes, you'll get light zingy blackcurrant notes. I think it'll be fantastic. So I'm going to show you next how we strain the juice off, how we get the juice out of this fruit into the bucket. Here's our sterile fermenting vessel, and here is a large fine mesh nylon bag. I'm going to put that into the bucket, and I'm going to put the fruit into the bag. Then when I want to get rid of the pulp and just have liquid, I can just lift out the bag and let it drip. All the blackberries in, 2 kilos of them. Now the black currants, look at the colour of those, aren't they beautiful? It's going to give a real depth to the colour and taste of the wine. That's our defrosted fruit in nylon straining bag in a big sterile bucket. That's all we've done so far. Now this first day, we don't want to start fermentation. All we're trying to do today is get that juice out of the fruit and also to kill off any wild yeast, which may seem counterintuitive. But wild yeast generally don't ferment out to a very high alcohol, and this is a very high alcohol wine. So what we're going to do to get the juice out, we're going to add a teaspoon of citric acid and a kilo of white granulated sugar to our fruit, and then I'm going to mash them all together with a potato masher. And on top of that, I'm going to put 2 litres of boiling water, and that will dissolve the whole lot. The sugar, if you've ever put sugar on rhubarb, you'll see the juice run when you put sugar on rhubarb. The sugar and the acid, to an extent, which helps break down the fruit, will draw out all that wonderful black curranty, blackberry goodness into the liquid that the hot water provides. Once we've done that, what I'm going to do is crush a single Campden tablet between a couple of spoons and dissolve it in hot water and add that to the mix. And the Campden tablet will kill wild yeast. Then I'll just leave the whole lot for 24 hours to get those flavours out, to let the Campden tablet work, and then we'll get on with the next step. So let's take a look at those processes. Here we go, with a kilo of just plain white granulated sugar. This is citric acid, just a white powder. It helps the yeast work well, and it also will help break down that fruit and add a nice little zingy citrus note to the wine. I really want to give this stuff a good mix. Get that sugar all mixed in, crush the skins of any whole berries, and get the whole lot into this beautiful, dark, rich liquid. We're going to let that juice flow for 24 hours now. Last thing for today, the first day, is we're going to put one of these Campden tablet into that mix and kill off any wild yeast that's found its way in. What I'm going to do, crush it between 2 spoons just to help it dissolve, put it in a jug with a little bit of boiling water, dissolve it all up, pour it into the mix. That's a Campden tablet, about the size of an aspirin, I suppose, that sort of thing. All I'll do, pop it in a spoon, put another spoon on top, press hard and sort of rock. And then what I get is a nice powder that's easy to dissolve. And I'll pop that in some boiling water, give it a stir, make sure it's fully dissolved, add it to the mix. I'm going to put a lid on and seal it up, keep out any dust and flies, and we'll leave all of that now for 24 hours. After 24 hours, the Campden tablet will have worked and will have sorted out any wild yeast. There's one other potential problem that we need to address at this point. When we're using blackcurrants particularly, there's quite a lot of pectin in the fruit. Pectin's brilliant for jam. It makes the jam set. It makes wine cloudy, but it's easy to sort out. What we do at this stage, just dissolve half a teaspoon of pectic enzyme in some warm water Once that's dissolved, swirl it into the mixture and leave it for 24 hours. And that will break down any pectin that's naturally in the fruit, make the wine much easier to clear. Pectic enzyme dissolves really easily, so that's simple. We just pour that into the wine must and wait for 24 hours. Well, we've given that pectic enzyme more than 24 hours to break down any pectin that's in the wine. We've actually given it 36 because life got in the way and I couldn't carry on yesterday. Today, I want to do two things. I want to measure the specific gravity of the wine, and I want to do that for two reasons. One is that by measuring the specific gravity at the beginning and the end, I can work out how much alcohol is in the wine. And for port, that's really important. The other one is, by measuring specific gravity, we can test when fermentation is complete. We can test it accurately. We're not guessing about bubbles going through airlocks and things like that. And that's also really, really good. It sounds scary, doesn't it? Specific gravity and measurements and hydrometers. It really isn't. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes to explain how it works, and hopefully then you'll understand why I'm doing it and why it's a good idea to do it in making homemade wine. Let me explain then hydrometers and specific gravity really quickly. This is a hydrometer. It's a weighted stick. Weight at one end, scale up here. And right at this point here, you can see a green and red line meet. There is a number that says 1.000. Now if I filled this measuring cylinder with pure water, put that stick in it, it will sink until the level of the water is right here. And 1.000 is the specific gravity of pure water. So this is what this is measuring, is effectively the density of a liquid. Now if I dissolve some sugar in that water, the density will increase, less of the stick will sink, and we'll get a reading somewhere down here. So it might be 1.070, for example. So we know it's not pure water, there's something dissolved in it because it's denser. When you're winemaking, you can measure that at the beginning of the process. And as you go through and as the yeast consumes the sugar, gradually more and more and more of your hydrometer will sink until the level gets back to 1.000 when all the sugar has gone. In fact, it will even go beyond that because alcohol has a different density to water. So it is quite possible, and indeed quite likely, when you're fermenting, that not only will it come back to 1.000, but you could even end up at a level lower than that, because what you're actually testing is a mix of alcohol and water, not pure water. We can use that in two ways. If we take a measurement at the beginning of fermentation and a measurement at the end, we can work out the change, and with a little bit of maths, the amount of that change will tell us how much alcohol is in the liquid. The other thing we can do to determine whether fermentation is complete is take a hydrometer reading, and if it has returned back to less than 1.000, we can be very confident that there is very little remaining sugar in our wine must. I've put some of our wine must in the cylinder and I floated the hydrometer in there. Right up here is the level that would be level with the surface of pure water. So you can see there's a massive difference, because in this wine must not only is there the kilo of sugar that we've added, but there's all the natural fruit sugars that have dissolved out of the fruit along with other material. So let's come in close, get a reading off our hydrometer and see what the level is, and then we can determine how that level changes through fermentation. It's a little bit closer in now. There is our 1.000 reading. Let's zoom in at the level of the liquid. You can see it moves from green to white, and that's at the point of 1.100, and that's a little bit above the surface of the liquid. So our reading is 1.102. That original gravity measurement is going to give us a great baseline now for measuring what's happening and what's changing in the wine as we go through it. Next step is to create a yeast starter culture, put it in the wine. Now I'm going to start fermentation in the primary fermenter, in the bucket, because it could be quite a vigorous fermentation, and if I did it in a demijohn, it can foam through the airlock. So for the first 3 or 4 days, I'll ferment in the bucket, and I'm going to leave the fruit in while that's happening to really get the last of that flavour out. The yeast I'm going to use on this occasion is what's called GV2, Gervin-2, very robust red wine yeast that ferments out to a good high alcohol level. You could use a champagne yeast, you could use a port yeast, they're fine too, but general purpose wine yeast generally stops fermenting at a lower level of alcohol than we're going to want for our Blackberry Port, so a specialist yeast is called for. I'm also going to put in a teaspoonful of yeast nutrient into the starter culture. By a starter culture, what I mean is I'm going to dump that sachet, teaspoonful of yeast nutrient, into some apple juice, stir it up, get it rehydrated, get it starting to ferment, then put it into the Blackberry Port. So let's do that now. You can see bubbles forming on the surface here, and that tells us the yeast is rehydrating, it's coming back to life and it's starting to work. So we can give it a quick stir, pour it into the wine must, put the lid back on and leave it till the violent fermentation is over. After 24 hours, you can probably see the amount of foam and froth that yeast has caused in the wine. That's why we don't start the fermentation in a demijohn. We'll leave it in there for a few days till all of that calms down. Those first 4 days of primary fermentation were some of the hottest days of the year, and oh my goodness, did that wine foam up. It would have gone right through the airlock in a demijohn, so we did the right thing by putting it in a bucket. Today's job is to strain off the fruit, which is very easy to do because it's in that fine mesh bag, and then we're going to transfer the liquid into a clean sterilised demijohn and complete the fermentation. So if I lift the bag out of the way, you can see the liquid now is relatively calm. I'm going to hang the bag up for a little bit, let it all drip and drain, and then we'll get that liquid into a demijohn. Bit of a side benefit of living in an old house is the ability to use old beams to hang up fruit bags to drain. While that fruit is dripping and the demijohn is sterilising, I thought I'd do a quick hydrometer reading, and goodness me, because of that high heat, this has been fermenting at an incredible rate. It is about 1.005 now, and it was a very high initial reading because of the fruit sugar and the sugar that we added. So almost all of that sugar has now been converted into alcohol, and it's happened so fast because of the high reading. To be honest, I would have probably been safe getting this into the demijohn yesterday at a reading of about 1.030, but because of the high temperatures, it's fermented faster than I would normally expect it to. No harm done, just interesting to note. There's our wine. I've squeezed the bag just gently with my hands to leave me with a dry pulp and get almost all of the liquid out. I've also tasted the wine with a spoon. Never be frightened to taste your wine as you're going along. You can learn a lot from the change in flavour. This wine started as a sweet, almost syrupy liquid. As almost all of that sugar is fermented out, it's dry and it's actually verging on the sharp now. And it'll get sharper still as the last of that sugar ferments out, but we will address that as we move forward. The next job then is just to take a simple siphon and siphon the liquid into the demijohn. There we are. I've got almost exactly a full gallon from the bucket. I've done this recipe before. I know how much water to add. If you haven't got quite enough liquid, top it up with cool tap water at this point to ensure that your demijohn has a full gallon inside it. One thing I am going to do now, I'm going to tie some brown paper around the demijohn just to stop sunlight bleaching out that lovely rich purple colour and lightening it as the fermentation carries on. I'm going to leave the demijohn until there are no more air bubbles passing through the airlock, and at that point I'll use the hydrometer to test to ensure that specific gravity shows me that fermentation is complete. There we are, a little brown paper jacket for the demijohn to keep that lovely purple colour in the wine. I'm going to leave that now to fully ferment, and I'm going to stop the video at this point and we'll continue on in a part 2. We're covering a lot of advanced techniques in this sequence. So we're going to talk about things like stabilising the wine, clearing the wine. We're going to use a technique called back sweetening, which means we can stop the wine from fermenting and then add in more sweetness to get to the level of sweetness we want. We're even going to talk about fortifying the wine, and that's basically adding spirits to wine to bring them up to a full sort of 20% alcohol port strength. So all of that's to come in the part 2, but I don't want to make this an unmanageably long video, so I think it's better split up into bite-sized pieces. If you've enjoyed today's bite, can you give us a thumbs up down below and let us know in the comment if this slightly more adventurous winemaking is for you, if you're interested in it. If you are, we can certainly do more of it. If you'd like to see the future parts, hit that subscribe button and the bell next to it if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and you'll hit every time we post the updates and all the other small holding, self-sufficiency, self-reliance videos that we make. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.